Going back a little bit with you and your love of professional wrestling, was wrestling
Mm.
something you grew up loving as a kid?
Oh yeah, absolutely. As soon as I saw it, I was really into comic books, and then I saw pro wrestling on TV, and this was the 1960s. So that one light over the ring, and guys who were larger than life. Of course, well, in my when I started watching wrestling, the champion was Bruno Sammartino, and if you grew up in this part of the country, Bruno Sammartino was like God. He was the man, and was the man for a very long period of time because people believed in him. Back in that era, wrestling had a very different aura than it has now. Um, People weren't sure what they were seeing was, predetermined or not. There was a lot of people that thought what they were seeing in that ring was 100% real.
That suspense of disbelief. You always want to make sure that the audience is knowing what's going on, and you want to think that this guy is about to tear into this other guy, and they got to make it look realistic. So that this person's actually hurt.
That's right.
That's important. That's part of the whole. That's part of the deal. So
Hmm.
you're intrigued when you watch it. It's like,
Right.
wow, oh my gosh, this person's suffering. He might have hurt his leg when he was performing a moonsault off the top rope. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, what one of the things that you want to do is make people feel something, tap into people's emotions. Doesn't matter whether it's a play or whether it's pro wrestling or a movie. Tapping into people's emotions is how you succeed.
Hmm. Now, you had mentioned a bit ago that you got your first job in professional wrestling, working for a collector's magazine outlet.
Well, it wasn't a job. I actually started that newsletter.
Oh, you started it. Okay.
Yeah, I started it and I published it and I wrote all the articles and so forth. I knew I could write, and I just thought it would be a cool little exercise. It was a niche that no one had touched. And at that point in time, after the '80s, wrestling memorabilia started to be a big thing. And I just did it more or less as a hobby. I didn't expect it, it was successful while it was running. I did make some money on it, but more importantly, I made a lot of contacts. And before I know it, I was getting involved with a local promotion, and off I went from there.
Do you remember the first call that you got asking if you were interested in doing something related in the business outside of your venture?
Well, here's the deal. I mean, when I was doing Matt Marketplace, one of the things I was doing is selling memorabilia through the newsletter. And I had thought about selling stuff at shows. I didn't really have any contacts. And then I met the late great Walter Killer Kowalski, and I started selling stuff at his shows, and that was pretty successful for me. Then in 1990, I went to a wrestling convention in New York. I bought a table and sold stuff at one of John Aresley's Weekend of Champions conventions in New York. The first one, which was really the big one that had Flair and Jushin Liger and Buddy Rogers and Bruno Sammartino and a whole bunch of people. I had a table, and this guy walks up to me, and it was Tony Rumble. And it turned out that we grew up less than a mile away from each other, but had never met each other until that moment in New York. And we became fast friends. And then I started to get involved with him and wanted to help him out in some way. He just wanted to have me around. He just wanted to have me around and how to sell stuff, and he thought it made the show look better, and gave people something to do, during the intermission. But I wanted to help out in some way. I offered to help out. And so I ended up doing the website, and I ended up doing tickets and doing all kinds of stuff, and learned a lot of things from Tony. And sadly, he passed away in November of 1999. And shortly after that, I started NECW.
It takes a lot of work to really get a promotion off the ground, a lot of hard work. What can you tell me about your decision to start up New England Championship Wrestling?
I was nervous because I had not worked in a wrestling office per se. I worked with Tony, and I got exposure to what he did and how he did things. and so forth. And I had some exposure to how Kowalski had done things and so forth. But starting up on my own was kind of a scary proposition. I had some good support from people around me, and was able to get going. But it took a good 5 years before I really had gotten my feet under me, and really started to get it, so to speak. And that education continued for another 5 years, and by the time I was 10 years into it, I pretty much knew what I was doing, and had already had a year of some television underneath. We started actually in 2004, before there was YouTube or anything like that. We started producing a little online TV show that we distributed on our website, and we did that for about almost 200 episodes.
Mm.
And yeah, so that was the beginning of our me training myself and training the people around me and so forth to produce something that resembled television. And eventually we did get on TV here in the Boston area, and we had a couple of different runs on television, but it took a long time to develop the feel for it and to learn things along the way and what worked and what didn't work and so forth. So it was a lot of trial and error, but we did it. We poured our hearts and souls into it. At least I did, and we we have a pretty remarkable track record of great matches and people that worked for us before they became famous and so forth. So,
Yeah, notable
um,
alumni that came through there.
mm,
Kofi Kingston, Mercedes Monet / Sasha Banks. Uh,
right. We gave her a first professional match.
wow. What was she like to work with?
Very easy. She was great. I wish we had worked with her more. She was a sweet girl. I remember the first show that she was on for us, which was her first professional match. She had her mom and her brother, and she was all excited. And that match is on YouTube. You can find it. It's in our something called our 20th anniversary collection, and it's a tag match. And she was great. I knew from looking at her the first time. I said, "This girl's got something."
Yeah. And she's now in AEW as of this recording, as of this podcast, and former multiple time WWE Women's Champion as Sasha Banks. And yeah, she's doing incredible right now in AEW. So Kofi Kingston's another one. Do you remember working with him?
Yep, yep. Kofi was always kind of looking to learn something, and uh, I remember having some conversations with him. How was my match? How was my match? And I'm like, kid, you're athletically, you're great. Personality wise, you've got something that very few guys in the area have, which is an actual personality. You could cut a promo. He could be a personality. He just had that kind of charismatic. He was doing the Jamaican gimmick at the time, and I told him, I says, just don't fall into any bad habits. Pursue the best training you can get, and you're going to go far. Sure enough.
Who's
I'll
some?
tell you who else worked for me before he became famous was John Cena. And he worked for us one time, and it was the first time that his family had seen him wrestle. He was getting ready to go from living in California and working for the UPW promotion out there to going to OVW, and he was coming home to get stuff, and a mutual friend of ours had put us together, and he wanted to have his family see him wrestle, and we just happened to have a card going on the weekend that he was going to be here. And so he wrestled Frankie Kazarian, of all people, on that card. And they had a terrific. His family bought like 80 tickets. I mean, most of the house was the scene of family, so it was pretty cool. But he was through. I told him, I said, "You're going to be world champion one of these days."
and to
So
see and to see the career that he's had, over 20 years is just remarkable. And
interesting thing about John, when I told him that he was booked, he sent me an email thanking me for booking him, promising that his match against Frankie Kazarian was never going to stink out the joint, that he was going to be great, and he was very grateful and so forth. So I always had a very high opinion of him because of that. Very conscientious kid.
mhm. he's definitely earned the moniker the greatest of all time because he just can do it all. Comedy, wrestling, showmanship.
Right, right, right. I don't know. I'd go as far as say greatest of all time, but he's up there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
In his era, he's probably up there.